Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. So we've got another podcast, and alhamdulillah, I'm joined by a fantastic panel. To my right, I've got Maulana Omair Sahib, who's an Imam. We've got to my left, Maulana Mooen, who's also an Imam. And we've got to his right, Maulana Muhammad, who's sort of an Imam, isn't it? Chaplin. He's a chaplain.
Charlie Chaplin.
And we've got the return of one of the original members of the podcast, he who must not be named, also known as Stig, also known as Doc. And I think that's about it. They call him Stig. So, Maulana, if you want to introduce yourself, I think everyone else is familiar with the rest of the panel.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. So, my name is Muhammad, and I am the Muslim Chaplin to the University of Manchester and Manchester Metropolitan University. Most people don't know what a chaplain is. So, I think it's interesting that you've got Imams here, because the job is very similar, but it's not. So, the job of a chaplain, you'll probably do as an Imam. But then there are things that we have to do in institutions that obviously you will not do unless you kind of actively go out there. So I started this job 10 years ago.
Wow.
I've been doing this for 10 years at University of Manchester, 8 years at MMU. And when I started, I was a student when I initially got into understanding a chaplain, and there weren't Muslim chaplains in universities. It was a very kind of a new thing. Christian chaplaincy has always kind of been around, Anglicans especially. Jewish chaplains as well. Jewish chaplaincy is a bit further advanced than Muslim chaplaincy. But chaplains were usually found in hospitals and prisons. And so initially when I started, I worked in prison and I did hospital chaplaincy and to try and learn the trade, I guess. But the aim was always to come back to university. And the chaplains that were there were all Maulanas, Imams from the local masjid. And I remember at the time, a lot of the issues that were being faced by Muslim students. So we're talking about things that were theological issues about, we're talking about 15 years ago, things that they really couldn't really talk to their academic staff about. They'd go to the Christian chaplain. And then their expertise obviously is not Islam, so then they would have to kind of go and ask. And one of the things they were doing a lot was asking students. Now that was just difficult because, as you know, not all Muslims are Muslims in the same way that they want us to be. And so things like Jum'ah. So is Jum'ah compulsory? Well, yeah, we know it is. But then you get the odd staff member to say, well, you can pray Dhuhr. It's okay.
Yeah.
They don't need to. You don't have to do anything with that. Leaving classes or maybe going on a trip to Umrah, Ramadan, things like that. If it wasn't on their radar, they wouldn't do anything about it. And so there was definitely a need for like a kind of a Muslim expert in an institution. So the main role of a chaplain is to kind of be that voice of the faith in an institution, whether it be hospital, prison, and so in university. Mainly the job is pastoral, so it's talking to students about issues, and we'll talk about that later, but they can range from everything.
Okay, we want to draw on your experience. You said 10 years in the game you've been there. Hafiz as well has been an Imam of Central Mosque for how many years now?
6+ years.
6 years as well. So what we want to talk about are those youth-related issues that people are facing in university, and I believe our resident doctor here has also got some questions as well for us as well. So what are the common issues that you're seeing, Sidi Muhammad, as a chaplain of the university, things that you've seen over the 10 years that are really troubling Muslim youth in particular, things that, using this platform, perhaps we can shed some light, give some guidance on them?
Well, I remember very distinctively, my first ever kind of pastoral case was one about gambling. So the chaplain had been referred by a student, had been referred to him. He kind of emailed me and I had to go meet a student. Initially it was a bit confusing. You don't really know what they're going to bring, and so we were sat there and he was talking about his life, and then all of a sudden at the end he said, I've done something that I shouldn't have really done, and I've spent all my money my parents gave me. I downloaded an app. It's one of those apps, gambling apps first came out, and I've downloaded it. So I was assuming that he was worried about money. I said, okay, let's go and try and ask for some money from the Students' Union, whatever it is. And he goes, no. Will I go to hell? Oh. I remember smiling. So I thought, subhanAllah, he's come because he wants to know about Tawbah. He wants to know about how he can return back to Allah and what he's done in the sight of Allah, and how is it, because in the Quran Allah says put into his gambling and wine, and the harm outweighs the benefit. And so he was worried about how doomed was he, I guess. And so alhamdulillah, the next 10-15 minutes was just talking about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, talking about how Allah forgives us that we go off the path. And that kind of ease, because he very quickly kind of started getting a bit more comfortable. And so it could be anything. And so, in the old days it was gambling. Whenever something new comes, a new fitna comes. So at the moment, recently, it's been a lot of social media stuff. Finance. students worrying about the tuition fee loan versus the maintenance loan. When I was at university, when someone was at university here, it was a grant. You know, my first degree was £1,250, and then it's went up to £3,000 a year, then £9,000 a year. So there's a lot of financial issues, riba interest. There's issues about, you know, people bring a lot of mental health issues with them, family problems, moving out of the house for the first time, loneliness. It ranges from everything. Homesickness, everything that you probably hear in a masjid, it's the same. So Imam, what about you? What do you get? Because you'll probably get everything I get. I've seen it. You talk to me about this kind of stuff.
I think the role of an Imam and a chaplain is very, very similar. The fact that you get asked these questions a lot, obviously because you're an image in the university where students feel comfortable around you. So I think in that uni life where you play that role is because they're looking up to you as someone that they can come and confine in. And I personally believe they'd confine in you more than an Imam because you're not an Imam. As an Imam, they think that we may judge them, or we might even know their parents or their family members. The students that do normally talk to myself, for example, are students that are going through a lot of the questions that we get is regarding depression. They need peace in their life. Mom said, I've done this, I've done that. How can I make myself better? I still remember when I started to be an Imam, there was a Namazi that I was seeing quite a lot at the masjid. He's a young man, he lives, I won't take names of where he lives as some people may know him, but he always used to have one question on his mind, and he actually worked in a university as well in Bolton. He used to always have a question on his mind, and he used to say, and every salah he'd come to me, he'd say, can Allah forgive every sin? I'd say, yeah, Allah can forgive every sin. He'd go, are you sure? I say, yeah, Allah will forgive every sin, bro. If you ask for tawbah, you turn to him, he's the most forgiving, most merciful. And this was constantly over a week or two.
Wow.
He would keep coming, every salah, Imam said, can Allah forgive every sin? I go, yes, he can forgive every sin. And one day he opened up to me, and he didn't directly tell me what the sin was, but he went into detail. He said, what about someone who leaves Islam and then comes back to it? Will Allah forgive that such person? And I said, look, the fact that you turn back to him, Allah will forgive you. That was probably one of my first experiences of when I became an Imam. One of the questions I had was regarding faith and shirk, basically, which is, you know, a touchy subject when we hear shirk, especially in the masajids. You know, shirk, Islam is all based on tawheed. It's based on the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when someone does go down that phase, they will come out with these questions. But personally, as an Imam, I think the roles that a chaplain plays and an Imam plays, Hafiz Fahim Sahab, Hafiz Omair Sahab will know better as well, is that we probably get the most similar questions coming. Marriage, I did this, I did that, I want to do this, I want to do that. Can I do this without my parents' permission? Can I do it? Do I need their permission to do it? You know, these are the sort of questions that I've personally had. And to tackle them, we always have to, as an Imam, always have to play an Islamic perspective first. I know as a chaplain, you might, you know, give them that, what's happening in social life and give them an answer accordingly. But as an Imam, I think it's a bit more tougher given the answer due to us being people that they look up to.
One of the issues is when you're an Imam is you're sort of seen as authoritative in the religion, not just representative, but authoritative.
It's like they want to hear it from the Imam. So if I've said it, that's it. They've got the 100% go ahead.
Whereas if the chaplain says it, they're going to come to Imam and say, well, the chaplain said it.
Yes.
Can I verify it?
Yeah.
It's
so
like my
authority.
case. I had one. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. My student, I think it was in college, he came up to me and he said, "Can I speak to you on the side?" I said, "Go ahead." So he said, "I've done zina. Will Allah forgive me or not?" And I think this is one which is a hot topic in universities. Like when, for example, our brothers or sisters who come from London up here, Manchester, staying in Manchester, no one's around, parents are not here, siblings are not here, the freedom that they get, and then to go and do these sins is very easy for them. And then when they indulge in that, that's when they remember, you know what, will Allah forgive us or not?
Can I ask a question? The Imams, they've gone through an Islamic course. Chaplain, do you go through some kind of a course, or do you have a qualification?
So I studied law first at the University of Manchester. Then I did Arabic and Islamic Studies at the University of Manchester as a BA. And while I was doing that, you have to kind of do hands-on training. So you have to go work with chaplains, shadow them. That's really where the work is. Markfield Institute, which I know Mooen Sahib has
I
done.
think the entire panel here
all
We all
are
done
graduates of
There's
Markfield.
something in that in Mark's
When I was first there at the university, it cost like $2,500. The university didn't want to pay for it. The truth is, to get chaplaincy established in an institution, it was very difficult. Most chaplains will tell you that. But I want to just roll back about this idea of qualification, because it comes back to what you said, Hafiz Sahib, that there's an authority. I'll tell you the one big issue that is the elephant in the room here. Some people would sit looking at you Imams and looking at me and thinking, Aqeedah wise, do they follow the same fiqh? And that's a massive issue at university.
Right.
So remember, you've got now a melting pot of all different people coming in, and you get all the arguments, and they're all mini shuyukh, the Salafis, Wahhabiyya, Sunni, Shia, this, that, but they all mix. And then I will do a khutbah, for example, and it'll be on a topic. So let's talk about Sha'ban. Nif Sha'ban.
Okay.
What do you do on the virtues of the night?
Yeah.
Now, again, which university? MMU and UM, massively different universities, hugely different. They're on the same road, academically differently, even Aqeedah-wise very different. And you kind of can see that the students that come from Manmet are more local, Blackburn, Bolton, Bradford, Nelson, and there's a certain way they expect. And so in universities, some students won't come to our khutbah, they'll say, I go to Victoria Park, we don't come to where you do it. Some students ask for a separate Jummah, because they will see the chaplain, they're let's say the word suspicious. Is he trying to teach us a certain way? Is he trying to take us away from what we're taught? Does he have a certain view? A lot of the students just want to know what you believe in.
Yeah.
So what's your background? Where did you study? What did you know? To kind of gauge whether or not they can take from me. But very quickly what you understand is that we're all flawed. Human beings are by definition flawed.
Yeah.
We're all sinful. And most people just want someone to listen to them.
Yeah.
They actually don't want an answer. And I don't know what with an imam, I mean, they want a ruling, they want a fatwa, they want some kind of answer. But generally, most people just want to tell you their problems.
Yeah, half the job is done just by listening.
It doesn't require an answer. Where it requires an answer, I guess even then you'd verify, you'd discuss, you'd explain. So, for example, marriage. Let's talk about marriage. How many?
Just backtrack just because we're going to go into particular topics in, like for example, marriage. So I thought Hafiz Mooen was going to say that the biggest thing that comes to him is possession rather than depression, because they're very similar. It's a fine line between the two. But with yourself, when you talk about students coming up to you, the first thing they're going to see is you. He's got a short beard, for example. Yeah. How you look like. Do you dress like this there? Or
I dress like the university, but Hafiz gave it to me, so I know where I want.
Okay.
But
can you just take your hat off for a second, just so the students know how
I'm
you...
bald.
Yeah, there you go.
So I've got no hair now, you can see.
No, it's just that being approachable, how you hold yourself is extremely important. Yeah. So, I mean, this is like your...
Normal, yeah, dressed.
Okay.
I mean, I'll go in a hoodie sometimes, Man City hoodie, my whatever. You're a bit more relaxed.
That's
where
better.
It's interesting because when I was speaking to the staff, one of the staff members, she works in the wellbeing, and she said, "Why don't you come in like Western clothes sometimes?" And I was like, "What does that mean?" She goes, "Because it might make you more approachable." But then on the flip side, for example, we'll see staff members and they'll then see me in a thobe, but they'll see me wearing some sandals or whatever. Then I'll have like a hoodie on, sitting there. So they don't know how to talk to you. They know in the Muslim guy. Then start talking about football.
Yeah.
And then football anyone can talk about. And all of a sudden you find a level that everyone's on.
Absolutely.
You get the students who think then if you're not coming in something that's more authentic, then you're trying to be whitewashed. Or you're trying to fit in. So no one's going to be pleased with you whatever you do, right? No matter what you try.
You know that lady you're talking from Wellbeing, she's my next door neighbour.
Is she?
Yeah. So, so we have a bit of a take on how things work. Can I ask you, do non-Muslims come to you?
Yeah, all the time.
Wow.
It's interesting because I worked in a whole residence first. So 2014, I started about 2012, the actual role. For the first year, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you're looking after prayer rooms, you're doing Jummah, you're trying to sort. It's about trying to get these students on first of all, get a hold grip of them. And we'll talk about the societies in a minute. We'll talk about that drama that brings with universities in a second. But in terms of just getting into the role, getting out there, meeting different departments, it's a behemoth. Yeah. And so when you're first starting, a lot of what you're doing is trying to understand the way it works, because it's not a masjid, it's not like there's no committee, there's no rules. And so when they talk about coming to me for a problem, a lot of the non-Muslim students didn't really know what my role was, the same way Muslim students didn't know what my role was. And so initially I was put into a hall of residence which is very close to my house. It was all male hall residents, one of the only ones in the north. And 95% were non-Muslim, 98%. And the Muslims that were in the hall, Islam wasn't their number one topic at university, just put it that way. So I was coming to lead the prayers and do salah and stuff after dinner. And like one or two guys with me. I mean, they'd come and see me, they'd come and join.
I saw at the MMU, I went to MMU, the prayer room there. At the time, there was no salah time. You know, the Jamaat
just come
time.
And pray, just come and pray and do your
So
own
it
thing.
was every single person, Tom, Dick and Abdullah, was coming up, right, and
the Jamaat.
And leading the Jamaat. So I found it very difficult at uni to read Jamaat, or to read Jamaat in the prayer room, because as an Imam, if you want to call it, to be there in that environment, to read Namaz behind a person whose tajweed is just atrocious. For example, there was one person who did the Jummah Namaz, and he said, Min nafasati fil qat. He's reading the Jummah. So to read Namaz behind him, I found it very difficult. So I think this is one of the issues as an Imam, to be in uni and then to go into the prayer room, I felt. I don't know.
For the daily prayers, I guess. Look, we have to. You have
Do we
to.
have that now in uni? Where they
No,
are?
not the daily Jummah. We have people coming in for khutbahs, etc. And we have.
Well, that's because it's not a mosque per se, and it's a prayer space. It's a
room,
musalla, not a masjid.
musalla. And this is a massive drama with the students about musalla. And explain to. Remember, we're now talking to people who don't understand the deen, right?
Yeah.
And it's explaining to them. So this issue might come up.
Yeah.
So then they'll come to someone at university and then they'll say to a staff member, we want someone who does this.
Yeah.
A certain society member will come and say, why don't you have a Shia Imam?
Yeah.
Why don't you have one of our Imams? Why do you always bring Wahhabis to do the khutbah? Why is it only a guy who talks about this? Why did he say this khutbah? You're trying to cater. So here's how I answer the people. We have to keep everyone slightly unhappy. No one's in control, but no one really gets what they want. So we're all just slumming. We're all living with it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the tajweed issue, it's upon the students, so the Hafiz has the priority.
Yeah.
So if you're 8 of you, you ask who's the Hafiz here, who's the guy, knowledgeable, pushing forward. People don't want to do that. They want to go up there, they want to go to the mic. And you see
they don't
that.
want to read behind everybody.
And then that's another issue. Well, I'm not going to pray behind him. Why is he wearing socks for? Has he performed wudu correctly? And honestly, you get all these little Aqeedah issues and you're thinking, why are you arguing for? You're fighting with each other. I'll leave them to it.
I suppose that's one thing, because Imams take for granted is because we're an Imam of a specific mosque and we know that community.
Everyone's following your way.
Everyone's following our way, whereas you've got the hot pot, you've got every background coming at
you
you.
get the odd question
You do.
from someone, but not as much as you would on a daily basis.
I had another case. This was in my second year of uni, where we had a West Qadri came
to the uni.
Manchester Uni, the prayer room, and Brother Nadir was the head of
Medina
the
Society.
Medina Society back then. So he had organised a West Qadri to come and do the Mehfir at the Manchester University prayer room.
McDougall's.
Yeah. So just before, I think a few hours before the Mehfir, what happened was the ISOC, they kicked in and they said, oh, there's health and safety issues, and they tried to cancel the program. So they moved it to where the society was, the
Academy Students Union or something like
and
that.
then they did it in the music hall.
Yeah,
So,
you know,
this type of issue I saw at uni.
This is a big
that's
issue.
because of they would have been from a different Aqeedah.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
of
why,
course
that's
it
why
is.
they would have pushed it.
Stop
to
playing
you know,
games,
going back to the non-Muslims, because they're the majority there. So when they come to you, what will they ask you? Why would
Some of it would be theological, asking why do Muslims do this, why do they do that, which is good that way, I guess. You can.
Yeah.
But then a lot of it was just what normal other Muslim boys or girls go through, but mainly males, and it would be relationship issues, from issues at home. Now, I'll tell you that the big problem with that.
so they
then,
look at you as a counsellor,
just
rather
more
than
of someone, just more like someone to speak to, a pastoral kind of
somebody
advisor.
speak
Do you find
private, yeah.
religious non-Muslims come to you, or they will go to their chaplain? So let's say, do Christians come to you,
No.
practicing Christians,
No.
or they go to their
They
chaplain?
come to argue. So one of the funny things is you get the very devout kind of religious people in their faith who'd come and try and challenge you.
Evangelists.
So interestingly, Surah Al-Kahf was being recited tonight in
Yeah.
the Salah, and I smiled because the first 5 ayat, I remember that it caused a massive issue in the hall, because one day two Christian boys, they were slightly drunk, and they were a bit bolshy today, they had a few, sat down, and they started talking about Islam, and then one of the friends came who was very kind of preachy, and so he said, what is your view then on Jesus? So I just said, okay, listen to watch this. So I played Surah, and they were watching the Surah, and you can see literally when they say, you know, what does Allah say about this? And they say, we're warning for mankind, and the warning to those who say Allah has a son. And you could see their faces drop.
Wow.
And then one of the tutors walked in and goes, what the hell have you been talking about? Religion. I told you don't talk about religion or politics, it's going to get into trouble. So in those situations you have to be very delicate, because your job is not to preach to them.
Okay.
One of the things that you have to kind of agree to being a chaplain is non-proselytization. So you're not here to preach or to get followers, but you are allowed though to be the authority figure. So, for example, if we have a prayer room and someone wants to do something that's non-Islamic, then we can say, well, this is not conducive to that environment. No one will come, for example, and say, well, a woman should lead the prayer with men. They won't do that. I know a lot of people fear that. How many times have people, students said, we'll talk about again wokeness and all this kind of culture that's coming, LGBT and gender issues that are becoming rife. But we have that kind of agreement with the university that we will be as honest as we can to kind of orthodox religion, rather than to kind of preach. So with the non-Muslims, they just want to talk to you. They want some advice. The one thing that's difficult though is we use the Quran and Sunnah for all of our answers. With them, it doesn't mean anything. Allah said this. If someone dies, they're going through grief. A relationship, they've lost someone, they've had a fight with their family. In Islam, all the lines that just come rolling off your tongue. The Prophet said this, the Quran says this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can't do it with them. But then what you do, you try and draw on it. So in our religion, we would say this. In our religion, you would say that. And then you try and say, well, have you got any faith? Do you believe in God? And you try and guide them like that. But generally, they just want to talk to you.
So, when non-Muslim or Muslim females come to you, do you sit in like a closed environment because you want to speak to some private...
We talked about this, about being careful. And the answer is you just don't want to do it. So
it's too risky, isn't it?
To be honest,
even police officers would take in somebody else.
In this day and age, it's very...
it's very...
Especially with what's happening in the world, I think it's even in general, a man just sitting with a woman on her own is something that needs to be looked at because of the later on issues which may arise as well.
So you Imams at like a Manchester Central Mosque as well, obviously you have cameras and stuff, so when a female wants to discuss something private,
personally I'd always take in the library and make sure there's at least one other male with me, at least someone from the masjid. Someone that's either, we have Bali Sahib, who's the new receptionist there, if there's Imam Sahib there, any of the committee members are there, any volunteers are there, even up to the caretaker. As long as someone's sat in there with us, regardless of if there's one woman, two women, at least I would never do it. I would, as an Imam anyway, I would never sit on my own with someone and talk to them.
Okay, so here's a hot question, because you mentioned hope. And we're talking about forgiveness of sin, both of you have as well. So I'm putting this to the Imams and to the Chaplain as well. How would you answer it? Would it be different or the same? So if somebody comes to you and says that I have disobeyed my parents, I have shouted at my parents, I've been rude to my parents, will I be forgiven? Because it's a sticky topic, because obviously here there would be, listening to the podcast, families and parents as well as parents whose children may be going to university, and some people say university is the best place to lose your iman. So how would you answer that?
So if I go first then, and the Imams can judge whether or not they differ. In terms of, I guess, going back to the origin of what you said, Imam Sahib, it's non-judgmental. So now someone's come to you and they say, I've done this. I guess you've got two ways of doing it. You can either dig into the details of why, but generally my answer will always be the same. No matter what it is that you've done, I will be on the side of the parents, because Allah in the Quran commands you to. So if you're being rude to your parents, there's no reason. And before I've even got to the topic, I'll explain to them for 10 reasons, examples why Ibrahim alayhi salam, he Abati, he spoke to his father. He was not only the one who worshipped idols, he was the maker of idols. He threw his son into a fire. Ibrahim alayhi salam made dua to his father even after his father had died. Your parents would have not done that to you. The fact that they were there for you, they did everything for you, even if they were harsh to you, the way Allah has commanded you to speak to them is with, do not say uff to them. All the same things you would say, Surah Isra 23, 24, we get it out, we read it, we make them read it. What does that say? But the
youngsters regularly hear that. What they want to know, I mean, for example,
forgiveness.
One youngster came to me, he said, my dad's a monster and my mum's a dragon. So the thing is, I find it very hard to get on with my parents. They're very backward minded, they're very spiteful. It seems if they're out for vengeance or something. So the thing is, we can't get on with whenever we want to sit down and talk, we end up in an argument. I raise my voice and they raise their voices as well, and I say all sorts of things I shouldn't say. And I know all of what you're saying, Imam Sahib or Chaplain Sahib, but the thing is, would I be forgiven? Because this regularly happens with my parents.
I guess the difference between what I have at my disposal and what you guys don't then is I have the counselling service.
Okay.
So I will then say, well, this is the theological issue. but what is it that's happening? It might be, for example, there's some things going on in the family, might be some history, there might be something that's a bit deeper. And when you get into that, it depends, again, not all students who come to you are going to be on a practicing level.
Yeah.
That's another thing. You can't assume someone's level of Iman, understanding where they are in their education. And so you have to talk to them on a basic level. But generally, my generic answer would be about being good to your parents. The idea of forgiveness, well, in Allah Ghafur Rahim, Allah is all forgiving, all merciful. That you know that if you repent to Allah, that you turn back to Him and you apologise to your parents and you be good, then obviously then everything can be wiped clean, you start again.
This is the problem. So many of them come, they say, we do apologise to our parents, but they say, you know that hadith when that Sahabi was going to be burnt by the Prophet because he upset his mother, and they go on and on, all your ibadat and all the good deeds that you do will be nullified because you have upset me, because the parents want children to obey them to an extreme level.
I think what's
we're
happening
looking
is
at this.
the parents are, I think the example where you're taking it to is some of the parents they're not firstly speaking English, Urdu speaking, Punjabi speaking, secondly they're not up to date with the social media, the way other youngsters run their life. The parents there's a massive gap between the parents and the children. Now when the child is trying to say something, the parents are not understanding, and the parents are not understanding the child, and that leads to an argument.
No, so I've had this where I had a friend, actually, very close friend. I used to go gym with him before COVID.
Yeah.
And
one day I haven't been to a gym, you can tell the difference. That's one difference between us two.
He actually one day broke down in the car with me, and just before we entered the gym, and I said, Dad, I've never seen you in my life. I know you since I was a child. What's wrong with you, Dad? And like, why you broke down like this? What's happening? And the first thing he said was exactly what Maulana Sahib just said. He goes, my parents don't understand me. I go, what's happened? He goes, all my life. He goes, up to where I am now. He's about 30 now. He goes, there's never come a time where I've been able to sit with my mum and dad and just have a normal conversation with them. Just a normal, yes, how you doing? Son, what do you want to do? Where do you see yourself going? How can I help you become what you want to become? And it's exactly what Maulana Sahib said. These are the issues that children face at home sometimes, especially with parents who are not understanding of what their children are getting up to in society.
So when they go to university, it's worse, because in university it's like this melt pot of like different ideas.
What I would say to that is they're saying the parents don't understand them, but Allah does. So if you're doing everything you can within your capability, then Allah's not going to punish you. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Allah is not himself zalim. So if your parents are the zalim in that situation, the oppressors, then those people shouldn't despair. They're doing everything they can within their capability out of ihsan, and Allah won't punish them at the end
this
of the day.
This is really important what Hafiz just said, because you talk about counselling, sometimes the question, how good is counselling, how productive is it, does it really work? Psychotherapists as well, like some people, they have emotional traumas. Yeah, they're not emotionally intelligent, you can say. So because you're raised up in, for example, most of us in England, we come from the subcontinent, Pakistan, let's just say, and there's Pakistani culture and the mind that the parent is somewhat just below God. Yeah, so if you talk to these youngsters, they say, well, there's so much emphasis put on parents in Islam. We want to question, is that Pakistani culture or is that really Islam? Because our parents are oppressing us, they're doing zulm on us. Yeah, now this is good for parents to hear as well, because when they go to university and with all the, like Hafsab said, all these social media and the kind of friends that they have, their parents never had that, so they don't understand what they're going through. So like I've spoken to like the National Psychotherapy Society and people like that. They said that we have a greater number of Muslims entering our service, but we don't know how to help them, because we don't understand the faith aspect, the culture aspect. So with Chaplins, he said something similar. Now, when you come to the end result, what do you come to the end result? I've had listening services, I had counselling, psychotherapy, cognitive behavioural therapy, mindfulness course, you name it. I've done all of that. But at the end, I'm still square one. And you ask them why, and they said, because the problem is, and this was my point, so the problem is that the Imams in the masjid, they are not qualified counsellors, and the chaplains and people who are working out there as counsellors, they don't know Islamic knowledge. So me and Hafiz Uzair have discussed certain things like this in the past as well, where you collate the two, and then that's more productive. The problem is, in reality, parents should go to some parent training center where they collate the two. So the parents are the first door that the children will go to, because they raised them, they know them, because the parents are counselors as well, psychotherapists as well, Imams as well. They need to learn certain level of Islamic knowledge, because that's absent.
But do you think, I'm sorry, do you think that one of the biggest issues is that so if someone comes to you with any kind of problem, first of all, you don't really know, everyone's giving you their version of events, right?
Yeah.
There's hyperbole. I will go on what I'm presented with. None of us can get into a family dynamic.
Yeah.
You are presented with one version of the story.
Yeah.
There's probably two sides to it. They can tell you their parents are the worst thing in the world. Their parents will probably say that the kids are the most disobedient, worst things in the world. But there's something there. The truth is, what I believe, Hafiz Sahab, Imam Sahab, you tell me what you think of this. I believe that all of our jobs, though, come down to one thing. Our job is to give them the minimum they should understand religiously of what their requirement is in the eyes of Allah. Whether or not they choose to do it is not up to us.
Yeah.
I don't think we can take that weight on our shoulders. If we're giving the correct advice and saying, well, this is what Allah says, this is an example from the seerah, from another prophet, here's what you should do, you go and do it. If you have some past issues that you need to work on, then here's therapy, here's some tools, you can go and do it. If it's not working out, then we can't be responsible for their problem, because one thing we can't do is fix someone. And I don't know if you feel that pressure when someone comes to you. Do you feel the pressure when someone comes that you have to fix their problem? The truth is, most of the time you really can't, and you're only there for a bit of advice, for a bit of guidance. But to go into a holistic viewpoint, that to work together, of course it's ideal if we all work together in services, but we do. But that's the point. So I will contact Imam, I'll contact Shuyukh, I'll contact them. They'll come to me and say, I've got someone, can you come and intervene and talk to them? We use each other as a skill, and that's something that we should always do, and we should try and do it better.
I think the difference between our job and your job is, I'll give you an example here, is if, for example, a sister needs to give abortion, right?
We just
You
talked
talked about
this
this.
on the way driving. You
Yes,
see.
that's an abortion, right? Now, the least likely they'll come to the Imam for advice.
Because why do you think there would be least likely?
There's a stigma around the Imam, isn't it?
Because of the judgmental aspect.
Judgmental aspect, definitely.
Astaghfirullah, how could you do that?
Yeah.
But that's completely from not the truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess it's the figure, isn't it? It's how you look. You said at the beginning, how you present yourself.
Yeah.
If you're presented yourself as...
If I may interrupt, there's also another thing of the location. So Imams are found in the mosque, and the mosque has its hurmah, it has its respect. So there is that
Talking
aspect
about
where
certain
people
things.
won't come to the mosque, because how can I speak about those things?
This
in the
thing's
mosque? It
Very
does exist.
strict there, and I don't know if I could say these words with the Imam, or there's certain aspects
And
like
also
that.
the stigma that exists about, let's say, chaplains of old and Imams of old. I think the roles are crossing ever so more in the modern times that we live in. You find Imams who are actually more versed and capable to give that consolidation and what a chaplain would give, and now there are actually chaplains who are actually well versed on the religion, whereas the stigma used to be that they don't really know much about the religion. He's just a counsellor at the end of the day, and the Imam, he's just a religious figure who's really strict and
Like,
whatever.
for example, we've got that Sheikh Imran, our brother from Bradford,
Yeah.
who's the chaplain in the police station, but he's a alim.
Yeah.
He's a full-on
And
alim.
he's a very celebrated chaplain. So
Yeah.
there are
He's a
examples like
chaplain
this.
at the same time.
But can I ask you, the percentage of Muslims that come to you, are they more girls or boys?
In men.
Men.
And so we have a female chaplain now. We have a female,
Okay.
and Aliman, she's does chaplaincy. But just on one
She's
thing,
an alima as well?
yes, she is.
Okay.
I want to say one thing interestingly. You've heard this phrase, and it comes. Everyone claims to have said this. So when I was looking for it today, this is one thing I did research. It comes from a Christian saying. It's also been said by Imams, by speakers. That it came from someone who said, I think a long time ago, but the church should not be a place for the saints, like a meeting room for the saints. It should be a hospital for the
Fahim
sinners.
says that
And
about
then
the mosque.
another guy was saying, another speaker then says, or someone student called me today, or one speaker on TikTok was saying that the masjid should be a hospital for the sick and not a place for a gathering for the saints. And I think that's true as well. But I don't believe that the masajid have always painted themselves to be this home of the saints. I think that, especially the ones I work with,
It's
many
the
of
image
them.
that everyone's got about them.
But is that the mosque's problem, or is that the people's problem?
I think both parts share the blame. Mosques previously, if you look at the society, especially in the 80s, 90s, the Islamic community had to be more on its toes.
Had to establish
had
themselves.
to protect itself, protect its identity. Things like globalization were threatening culture. Mosques had their doors closed for a reason. Then you had things like, extremism, Islamophobia were rife, more violent back then. And, it's like that now. So I think things have changed. Mosques used to be very closed door. But speaking from my own experience in the mosque that, we do khidmah, the door is very, very open right
and
now.
I think since
things are
that
changing.
change has come in, we see a lot of youngsters in the masjid now compared to before. Before the Uncle G's coming in, you'd ask someone, why don't you go to the mosque? I don't understand what the Imam's saying. I don't know Urdu. I don't know what he's saying.
Now you have we talked about sort of trans, yeah. So there's
Did we?
transsexual, but there's also SECT, transsexual. Transsexual. The reason why I'm saying that is because the Imams, they're coming out with. I heard this Imam say this word. I thought, Subhanallah. I mean, he's into it. So one of the important things when you're doing as an Imam, the number one communication, obviously 70% is body language, but it's verbal. The kind of words that you use. Not just how you look, but the kind of words that you use as well is extremely important, just to catch people's attention. Mm-hmm. And the conversationalist is the person who wins people's minds. Yeah, I think one of the important things about being an Imam or Chaplain stroke counsellor is choosing your words and knowing how to relate to people. And the second thing is, you may say this may be metaphysical, or this may be your sixth sense, or this is like connecting personalities. Yeah, everybody can be a soulmate to you if you know how to connect, and that's the important bit. I find that the most successful, I don't even know what one word to give them, but I would say the ones who follow the prophetic way are the ones who can connect to other people emotionally, even more than mentally.
Sympathy.
You have this sort of aura, this sort of personality. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was there, he was like a magnet. Even if he never said anything, he was silent. He was like. So what we're really lacking is, or what we're looking towards is like how we look like and what we talk about. But there's this other side, and that other side. Now, some people say, how do you bring on the other side? Very easy. Worship. You worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ibadah, the proper way, the hajjah, the shraq, ja'ash, etc., the extras of, and it begins to grow. I mean, the Imams who are, you see an Imam who's a Hafiz and you see an Imam who's not a Hafiz. You can tell there's a different aura about it, So one of the things which I was going to suggest is, these days we do a lot of other stuff, but in the old days, they say the best Muslims that history has produced are the Sufis, because they were alims and then they reach the spiritual level. The worship side, I think we've sort of left that out a bit. Yeah, and because we left that out a bit, that connection that you have with your Lord, which then goes on to your connection with other people, that's lacking.
I knowing the chaplains I know, I can assure you, anyone watching, that for us it's definitely not the case. Our job, any one of us here, is to make sure that the person who you're talking to, if they're Muslim, is to establish that idea that there is a set of rules, there's a set of norms. Anything beyond that is debatable, but we have to kind of give those things. When it comes to it though, the problem I think a lot of people watching this maybe will think is, the answer for most Imams, chaplains, used to be just pray it away. So let's talk about the D word, the depression. I feel sad. You're not praying enough. Go and worship. Go and do some more adhkar. Go and do some more ibadat. Go and read some more Quran. Perfect. Absolutely. I think all of us would agree that's the tonic, that's the medicine.
I wouldn't agree with that.
However, who understands...
Somebody who's depressed and you give him 10,000 tasbihs to do every night.
But that's what the assumption people will come to someone of faith and they will just say to you, go to God, go and pray it away. And that's what parents will say. That's what a lot of their friends will say to them. And people generally don't know how to deal with other people's problems. They're really bad at it. Especially when it comes to grief. People say the wrong things at the wrong time, and that can really mess someone up. And so when someone comes to you, you have to treat them like their problem. To you, it might be the most crazy problem. It might be so nothing, but to them, it's everything. And you have to be sensitive enough to understand that is what they need help for. And they might believe they might be strong believers that, of course, I've been to Allah, but they want to understand why is it, so why am I feeling sad? And these existential questions are the very difficult ones, I'm sure, that you'll get.
Definitely.
Why, if Allah loves people, why does He put me in hellfire? If my friend is non-Muslim but she's really good, will Allah put her in hell? If I don't read all my salah, or if I do, but why do bad things happen to me then? These are the big life questions that I'm sure you get, and we just don't have the time to go into every single person and deal with. But not everything is like that. Some things are quick. So it might be, I've got an issue with my exams and I need an extension. Can you help me with that? I've got a girl I want to marry. Can you speak to her for me? There are some things that you can give practical help for, but there are things that you just cannot fix with human beings. And I don't feel that when we talk about the job of the chaplain, Imam, etc., when it comes to dealing with the human being, that we are expected to fix everyone.
Yeah, there's a difference between accountability and responsibility. We're not accountable for that person after they leave our room, leave our office, so to speak. What we are responsible is for presenting the religion in the right light.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what you're trying to say. We're trying to differentiate that. My job is not to take you on the path to purification itself. I'll show it you. I'll open the door for you. But ultimately, it's up to the person himself to go and make those.
Can I just disagree with that a little? The reason why I would disagree with that is because, the ulama of the ummah, they follow the prophetic way. Now, the ulama of the zahir and of the batin. So, they're not just opening doors for you, but they're taking you step by step.
That requires one thing, though, Sufi Sahib, is it requires the Imam himself to be experienced in that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something we're lacking. I speak for myself
That's
as well.
what I was going to say about
ourselves haven't
upgrading.
tasted those levels of Gnosticism.
Yeah.
How are we then going to
absolutely
explain it to somebody else?
Now, one of the things which I was going to say, like people listening to this podcast, and I was going to say, obviously you can write in comments as well. If we're wasting your time, please let us know, because we don't want to be answerable on Judgment Day. Similarly, for an imam or a chaplain or a counsellor, anybody, if we're wasting people's time, one of the things that we do in the community, those of us who help people, is if it's a Muslim, we say to them, do istikhara. Am I the right person to come to? At least do a dua, raise your hands to Allah. Am I the right person? Maybe your risk of happiness is probably written somewhere else. Your success is written somewhere else. Okay, and so that's one thing. Connection. The questions that you're saying, they're relevant, they're important, but you can simply answer them. Some people, they ask 1 million questions, and are you going to give them 1 million answers? So what you need to do is, with the questions, answer him in such a way where you're giving like Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, look at the hadith, there's so much contained in one sentence. Yeah, if you do that and then you link them onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I found that the best success rate, talk about fixing people. Yeah, the best success rate of fixing people is answer some of their essential questions, but then take them over to, some call it emotional stroke spiritual, their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some of these people will come back to you and they say, you know what, I've forgotten most of the questions which I wanted to ask, but I feel peace. I feel I know where I'm going. I mean, some of the best things that they would come back with is I've mapped out my life between now and entering the gates of paradise. Wow, I mean, that's a big thing. Why do you say that? Obviously, things can change on the way. But the reason why I say that is because, the Gnostics, or the people who are really connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they found also upgrading Imams and Chaplins as a suggestion is to go to different parts of the world, perhaps even in this country, sit with those people, take from those people. It's not really verbal, it's spiritual. Yeah, because, we have 4 different sides to ourselves. There's the mental, there's the emotional, there's the physical, and then there is the spiritual. And sometimes I feel like, why are we leaving the spiritual out? We do have mind, body and soul.
I'm sure the people agree. Have you looked around the youth at the moment?
Yeah.
Have you seen what I'm seeing? Spirituality is the last thing on most of their minds.
Absolutely.
I think...
But can I just say one quick thing?
Honestly, it's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what, let's talk about then, let's get into it. Let's deep dive. I've got students then who are smoking, who are swearing, who are not praying. Let's just be frankly honest. You work in the masjid. How many stuff are there for just Salah? These same people that come Tarawih, they're not coming to Salah. They're not praying. Their Quran is off. They come from backgrounds where their parents aren't praying. But their parents will outsource. Chalo Imam Sahib ke paas ja. Go on to him and he'll tell you what to do. You had them. They're yours. Where's the accountability at home? Then it's like, well, send them to school, they teach them everything, but you don't know what you're doing. Then they're not working, then they're fighting at home, they're not understanding how to answer the questions to them. They're people who are so far away from the deen, they have Islam as their religion, they'll tick the box, they're Muslim, they'll come Jum'ah, but besides that, Islam is not entering into their mind. When I talk about Ramadan, when we talk about the whole point of this fast, what is the whole point of this fast? The Prophet ﷺ made many hadith, he said that the only thing that some people get from fasting is being hungry and thirsty. If you do not give up bad speech and bad action, Allah will forgive you to food and drink, to give up your food and drink. To understand that is a spiritual thing. You have to have a spiritual understanding of Islam. If you don't get it, what is the point of this fast? In order that you maintain taqwa. What is taqwa? Explain to someone, ask 20 random young people, what's taqwa? Fearing God. God conscious, what does God conscious mean? I'm not sure. Taqwa. They might know a basic answer. So then it's like you're watching this building on fire and you think, where the heck do I start? And yes, we want ideally our Imams or Chaplins to be there, but someone's got to go and drag the bodies out. And so what I'll say is, okay, well, I'm here, I'll take as many as I can out. Hafiz Sahib, you're on the second floor, you grab them. Mooen Sahib, inshallah, you grab them, and we'll take as many as we can and save them with us. But in order for us to do that, we have to get our hands dirty. And also we have our own problems.
Our own vices.
We're humans. Shaitan is working on us as well. He's telling us to come over here, this is good. So what then do we do? The chaplains need chaplains, the Imam needs Imams. So I'll come to him if I need something. I'll come to Sheikh, one of the shuyukh I know, phone him and say, Sheikh, I'm out, I'm sick of this. These young people are driving me crazy, they're just disrespectful, they're rude, they're not listening to me. I tell them not to do this and they're still doing it, selling drugs. Let's talk about the problems of our ummah. Let's talk about the reality. Young people selling drugs, fighting each other in gang wars. And they're not interested, Imam Sahib, in spirituality, in what Gnosticism is. They don't even know what it is.
If that's the case,
they
then
need
why are
they're here,
Yeah.
and we're taking them there.
Yeah. So here's my point. So I go to many different non-Muslim events as well. So why are so many youngsters turning hippie? I'm not sure whether you noticed it. And I'll tell you how.
You said woke. I think he's referring to this whole new idea of
They're not.
spirituality.
The Muslims, subhanAllah, do you tell me, Imam Sahib, do you get that? I get the opposite. The youth are the ones who are opposing this. Is that what you would say? Because I see that.
I have to agree. Yeah.
They're sick of it.
What you said about the levels as well, I think that's a big thing. You need to understand them on their close to their level, and that's a lot of the issues that we have with a lot of Imams, Chaplins is.
And the advice they want is on that level.
Yeah.
The moment you're going to go on that level, they're going to be like, yo, I don't want to.
You know this thing about this level and that level. To be honest, I don't think is that level. Because we all have a soul, is still that level.
Yeah, but at the same time,
it's
like
getting
someone
through to that soul.
Yeah, getting through to that soul.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
You slowly got to guide them onto that step.
Yeah.
Like you can't
So originally, you may use logic, common sense, reasoning, but then something else comes in, special sense or spirituality. But you see, I don't think what we should do is say, oh, that's that level. That's seventh heaven and we're on the first heaven. No. Mind, body and soul is still one and is intact, and you have to deal with all. So you have to speak to them. Yeah. So you're talking on a physical level with them as well. There's this emotional attachment, and then their brains working along with your brain. You're trying to be on the same page as well. But in the same sense, don't say it's different. Spirituality is the same. With spirits, we're spirits.
In terms of Imam though. If someone's a man is up here and someone's down here, it's like someone who's afraid of heights. You can't take them all the way to the top and say, let's go parachuting.
That's one thing. We're again doing the top. I think it's the same.
I would have to agree with Sufi Sahib that I think there are elements of
because the soul is always
the main
there.
issue is it's the Imams themselves, the chaplains themselves. If they don't have the communication skills anyway, if they don't know what to say at the right time, then that person's never going to get help.
And that's spiritual
so when you were saying
along with
picking the right words and
time.
all of those things, I think the Prophet alludes to this where he says in the hadith, "Inna min al-bayani la sihra," that in speech, in public speaking, in speaking to people, there's actually a magic.
We read it today in the Manzil.
Ud'u ila sabil rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izati.
But then that's also, as we all know, we'd all probably agree with, that's also very dangerous. Because someone who can speak well can bring people and misguide them, and especially with the religion, and then you're unraveling a lot of that. So people will come to university and they'll come to you with things that I'm sure they come to you as well are just completely false. They're not part of the deen. My mum said this, my dad said that, and you can't go against that. The same way that if they come to me and Imam Mooen have said this on the khutbah, and is that correct? And I have to be very wary and be careful that I'm not disagreeing and we're not causing fitna. Muharram, how do we? Is it true? Is it true? Umar al-Khattab killed Fatima al-Zahra. Astaghfirullah. You say these things and you have to understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You're dealing with sensitivities. What is the hadith of the pen and the paper? Is it true? It's in Bukhari. What does man to Mawla Ali mean? They want to get into these issues because they're interesting. And so where do they find the answers? Not from you, me or him. They go on this.
They're on the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
They've got this now. This is something that we haven't even discussed. This is the new way of information. Are they even coming to us for the answers? Let's even ask that question. Or have they got the answers pre-prepared? Sheikh said this, Mufti Sahib said
The
that.
question is why they're going onto Google or not.
Well, Sheikh Google and Dr.
Easiest
Internet.
way of doing it.
And they're not asking their
called takeaway.
qualifications. Let me tell you something. You talk about, they're not asking their qualifications. It could be anyone in Dawah, man, this, that, I'm not mentioning names, I'm just saying it could be anyone. They're more knowledgeable than me. I'm talking about the idea that we're not asking people what is it, what Aqeedah they're on, and then they can follow a certain way. And so they've got the answers already.
Yeah.
Can I
The
say a
Imam is
difference
becoming
between
less important.
Yeah.
Like
The
the-
chaplains are becoming less important because
yeah,
this is the most
yeah,
important.
it's
Just get a
very
following.
influential.
Just get a following on Instagram.
Yeah,
You've got
people just
200,000
send
people.
5-minute
Start
videos.
uploading
You know,
things
the
and
chaplain
that's
and imam, because they are employed by the mosque, and there's and you are employed by the university. Yeah, so because you're employed by a non-Islamic institution, and they have their set of rules, then are you not more restricted than the imams to?
No.
So-
If I answer for him, I think imams are very restricted as well.
Yeah.
We need to recognize our role in that whole scenario. As an imam, as I said before, we're not there to take that person on that journey. There are those people that exist, and what we
Yeah.
need to do is recognize, where do I draw my line? Where do I stop speaking? If I carry on speaking, now I'm transgressing my actual role and responsibility now. So
Can
I
you make
don't
that
think
clear,
the
your
answer.
role as an imam? Like when you say transgressing, can you give an
I
idea
think
what those
the term
limits?
imam's changed over time as well. The imam
Yeah.
used to be the
Lead the
everything.
prayer.
First of all, the imam
medicine
used to be the sultan at one point. He was the
He was
Khalifa
the
himself.
authority.
The
He was
biggest.
the political
Yeah,
authority.
the mujaddid.
Then imam meant mufti, imam meant qadi, imam
Yeah.
meant the spiritual guide,
Yeah.
imam meant all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And now imam can mean just that one
Leads
guy
the
who
prayer
comes
twice
and
a
leads
day.
the prayers twice a day.
Not even
Probably the
five.
silent prayers. He
The
doesn't even read out
silent
loud.
Don't even know if
He's imam as well.
He's Imam.
Yeah.
So we need to recognize what do we mean by I'm an imam as well. Those spiritual guide imams out there, they are the people that you're referring to, and they do exist within society. And what we should do as chaplains or the regular imams you find in the mosque is recognize, this is where I stop. I've given my answer. If you want to go further, there's
Then
that individual, go to him
absolutely,
as
yeah.
well.
No, I think that's
What we
I
find
was-
nowadays, imams are transgressing this, saying, well, I'll become your spiritual guide as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where things are. Well,
Marriage counsellors.
There's
marriage
been
counselling.
times I've given Sufi Saab's number to people when I've actually, there's a point where I can't hit, especially when it comes to new Muslims. There's only so much as imams we can guide them on, but then it comes to where can we now put them in order for them to carry on learning that thing.
But is there a limit with the institution, like the mosque institution and the university institution? So in other words, if you say this, you will be fired, you will be sacked.
I
Is that?
think, I'm sorry, but I have to say I agree with you, Hafiz Sahib. The imams, the masajid are very limited. The committee can kick you out. How
Yeah.
many scandals have we seen in
Yeah,
the
that's
masajid?
what I'm
They kick you out.
referring
You have
to,
to be
yeah.
on the aqeedah. If you're saying something that's not right, you're out. But in the some masajid, the imam is the authority.
Yeah.
What he says goes. And in Muslim organizations as well. I feel like in university it's easier because we are not bound by a committee, by a rule. If I can justify what I've said
Yeah.
through its religion, then they will have to accept the fact that it's not being said to kind of manipulate an individual, but it's being said, look, we have rules in terms of like I'm trying to think of something that you might say is restrictive. Okay, prevent. So what prevent?
Yeah,
Never
okay.
discuss prevent.
Let's go.
That's a big issue. That came up a lot. 2015, 16, that was a massive issue. Most of the chaplains that were put in the early 12, 13, 14s were prevent chaplains. They were looked at as suspicious. You're spying on us. You're watching what we're doing. And then speak to you for 5 minutes, they realise you're not even working for the university. You don't work. Who are you working for then?
Yeah.
And I guess that freedom to feel like, well, if you get the trust of the people, the same with the imam, you're going to tell my dad. If I speak to you, you're going to snitch on my dad. I don't have contact with their parents. They've got that freedom. They might think that my brother. You're going to judge me. You're going to see me every day. I can't come to you. Where it comes to restriction, I guess that was one. But then even that was okay because they're not vetting your khutbahs. But what am I going to do on the minbar? What are we going to talk about? We're not talking about anything, calling anyone to do anything. Other than that, LGBT wokeness, this is a big one. I think on this point, I guess this is becoming more scary chaplains are becoming very scary of this.
Why? Because there are no clear
Scared of
guidelines. Is that?
It's not.
I would second that. I would say as imams as well. I don't think I know of many imams who have actually even mentioned those
Absolutely, yeah.
four
I'll give you an
letters on
example.
stage because we are actually very wary of
Let me tell you an example.
what
Imam.
happened to
I've
us.
done it.
Oh,
Just to let you know.
Hafiz, let me tell you what happened
Still got his
with
job.
the university. I won't name names. Some people might know the university.
Go on.
A female came to pray in the male side. So the boys, the students, obviously said, "Sister, you know the girl side is there." She wasn't taking. She wasn't listening. Then they said, "Okay, just pray behind the boys for now." Because she prayed behind the boys. Then after Salah, she said, "I want to come and pray here." And they asked why. And she said, "Because I identify as a man." They were like, "What are you doing?" They're young, you know. They swapped numbers, whatever. Then I won't name who. Someone then messaged her and said, "Sister, look in the mirror. You'll see if you're a man or a woman or not." Send that to the SU. The SU went crazy. It got into a big drama, and they didn't know what to do either because now it's religion. Now it's this kind of thing. But again, it's that word. Why would you say that to someone in the first place? Now it happened in a masjid. I don't know where it was in the south, and the Muslim Council of Britain. I think were contacted. Whoever was contacted about this, and it started to become on these WhatsApp groups, kind of like this. Was it one of those stories that just goes around where then male went into the woman's area. Now that's a bit more scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what is the big.
Yeah.
Now a man identifies as being a woman. He's in the wudu area. The sister with the hijab off. He wants to go and pray in the with female area. I remember when gay marriage first was legalized, and so a lot of the churches were scared. The Catholic churches would say to me that they're very nervous about having to officiate between two men.
Yeah.
And I think these are things that the UK have been very good at protecting institutions. Like look at COVID. The places that were allowed to open first were the places of worship.
Mm-hmm.
There is still an element of that, but I guess how long is that going to last?
Yeah.
And I think none of us can answer
It's
that
very
question.
volatile, isn't it?
And has it come into the Muslim ethos? Let's be honest. People watching this, have we even talked about homosexuality? Have we even talking about gender trans? We're not even at the L. There's a LGBTQ plus. It's I, and it's like, well, have we even discussed the L? Do we even admit the L? We're still doing this. We're still turning our face.
You can just say there's transgender. There's some of the cases that we cover. There's transgender. There's a transracial. Yeah. There's disabled, able. Yeah. They're trans-aged, and now there's also trans-species.
Yeah, someone identified.
They were.
I'm a dog, for
You know, when it
example.
comes to all this
Yeah.
I had a case in Kuba for that one.
I
had a
watched
case,
a clip the other day around, I think it was the Church of England,
Yeah.
where they are imposing now, and they're going to bring this into a law in the churches around God being genderless. So how can you say he?
Yes,
And
that's
this
what
is
they
now.
are.
This is how far it's gone.
Mm.
Yeah, into the religion where they're actually bringing this up
Well,
in churches as well.
Well, we as Muslims, we don't believe God has a gender.
Yeah.
He's not human or
See,
anything like
we
that.
just
But
say
we refer to him with that pronoun
masculine.
due to the Arabic language, the way it is. The masculine is, biologically speaking, has certain
We're being
qualities.
kicked off here.
Anyway,
We're being
but I
told
think- I think we initially wanted to talk about youth-related issues, but I think we went and diverted onto the role of a chaplain, the role of imam.
What's interesting, I think, hopefully people to hear.
Yeah.
I've got a question here. Look, if an imam does something wrong and it gets leaked, it's a big problem in the community. My question is that the same for a chaplain?
Of course, it'd be for anyone, I guess, in a figure. It'd be for a lecturer. It'd be for anyone who's in a figure position.
Yeah.
The answer would be that if they do something that people see as not conducive to the environment that they're in, then it would be. So, for example, if an imam went into a car with a female and he was by herself, and there was khalwa, whatever you could say, if there was any chance of it, then he would be accused. I guess that answer is yes, but that's for anyone in power. I don't think that's just unique to our positions. Anyone who's seen as an authority.
Yeah, but it's seen as more of a violation because you're supposed to be men of
You're
God.
supposed to be people who
Yeah,
are
religious
embodying what
individuals.
You know the group of people that work in the community that are safe from that are the ones who don't make any claims. So I spoke to a barrister who deals with his speciality is crime, and he said to me, when you're helping people, don't claim to be anything. I mean, I'm just your brother. You're just taking advice from me, yeah.
Go with
And you can say
expectation.
anything, any limit, any angle. You have no problem.
Right.
But those people who are employed, that they have this problem.
Yeah, I think to conclude then, we've seen what we are exposed to as imams, as chaplains and what have you. But I think in a coming segment we will be discussing more in detail the youth issues that are presented, and let's talk about solutions going forward as well.
Inshallah.
And that's it from us for today. I think we've gone over on time majorly. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment.